She apologized to the doctor for crying. Sit with that for a second. She was sitting in an office having just been told something terrifying about her own body, her own health, and when the tears came, she looked at the doctor and said, "I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm being like this." The doctor was paid to be there. That was his entire job. She was the patient. She was the one who just received devastating news. And her first instinct was to make sure the man across the desk wasn't inconvenienced by her grief. That's not politeness, that's not Canadian, that's not just how some people are, that is a person who learned, somewhere deep in their history, that their pain is a problem for other people, that their emotions are an imposition. That even in their worst moments, the most urgent thing is to manage the comfort of the room. And I don't want to just explain that to you today. I want you to feel it. Because there's a version of this living in a lot of people who have never once recognized it for what it is. So let's go in. The first type and the hardest to watch is the one I call the preemptive sacrifice. You know this person. Or maybe you are this person and you've never had a word for it until right now. They apologize before they ask anything, before they speak. Before they've done a single thing that could be construed as wrong, the apology is already out of their mouth, already floating in the air between you, already trying to soften a blow they're not sure is coming but have learned with great precision to expect. Sorry, this is probably a dumb question. Sorry to bother you, I know you're busy. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. They're not rambling, you were listening, you were engaged. And now you have to stop and reassure them, and the thing they were saying is gone, and they won't go back to it because the moment has passed, and they don't want to take up any more of your time. Here's what broke them, and I use that word carefully because something genuinely broke. At some point in their formation, love came with conditions attached that were never made explicit, not rules, not punishments. Something quieter and more corrosive: withdrawal, a parent who went cold without explanation, a caregiver whose warmth was abundant on good days and completely absent on bad ones. An environment where being too much, too loud, too needy, too present caused a shift in the atmosphere that the child could feel but never fully understand. So the child adapted. Children always adapt. They learned to make themselves smaller before anyone asked them to pre-apologize for their existence, to offer up the sacrifice of their own comfort before anyone else had to demand it. And 20, 30, 40 years later, they're still doing it, still offering, still shrinking, still holding out their apology like a handful of coins, hoping it's enough to keep the warmth on. What makes this unbearable to really see, and I mean truly see, is that the warmth they're trying to protect often isn't even threatened. The person they're apologizing to isn't irritated, isn't withdrawing, isn't about to go cold. But the preemptive sacrifice can't know that for certain, and uncertainty in a nervous system wired this way is indistinguishable from danger. So they pay anyway, just in case, every single time. Then there's the type that breaks my heart in a completely different way, the one I call the guilt cartographer. They don't just apologize for things they've done, they apologize for things they've imagined. They have mapped, in extraordinary detail, every possible way they might have offended, in a conversation that already happened, in a text that's already been read, in a silence that the other person has already forgotten. You leave dinner with them and say, "That was fun, let's do it again." They say great, they drive home, and by the time they're brushing their teeth, they're running the entire evening like footage. Did I talk too much? I talked too much in that first part. That joke I made, was that inappropriate? They laughed, but was it a polite laugh? When I asked about their job, did that feel intrusive? By morning, they've drafted an apology in their head for a dinner you remember as lovely. The psychology here is something that sounds like a gift until you see what it costs. They feel everything. Other people's discomfort doesn't brush past them, it lands, it sticks. They carry traces of other people's emotions the way a wool coat carries static. And because they feel so much, they assume they cannot stop assuming that they caused it. This is the wound. Somewhere in their past, they were the emotional first responder. The child who could tell from the sound of footsteps on the stairs what kind of night it was going to be. The teenager who learned to manage a parent's moods because no one else was going to. The young person who became so attuned to reading other people's pain that they lost the ability to distinguish between witnessing it and causing it. Their empathy is extraordinary, their perception is genuinely rare, and it is eating them alive because they cannot turn it off. They cannot go to a dinner and just be there. Every face is data. Every pause in conversation is a question. Every unreturned text is an indictment. They are exhausted in a way that's almost impossible to explain to people who don't share it, the exhaustion of being perpetually on trial inside your own head. And the apology is the verdict they keep handing down before anyone even calls the court to order. The third type is the one people least expect to find in this video, because from the outside they seem fine, they're articulate. They're put together. In professional settings, they're often impressive, clear, decisive, competent, but watch them closely in the moments after they've expressed an opinion, after they've asked for something, after they've taken up space in a conversation in any meaningful way. Watch the face. There it is, a brief flash of something, not quite anxiety, something more like guilt, and then, but that's just me, maybe I'm wrong. Or, sorry, I tend to get intense about this stuff. Or they just quietly dial back whatever they said, softening it into something so hedged it barely means anything anymore. I call them the permission seeker. And what they're doing every time is checking whether they're still allowed to have opinions, still allowed to take up space, still allowed to be who they are without cost to the people around them. This one starts in a different kind of home, not always chaotic, sometimes very calm on the surface. But somewhere in that calm was a message: who you naturally are is a bit much, too loud, too intense, too emotional, too everything. Said sometimes explicitly, often through expression alone, the slight wince when they got excited, the sigh when they were too much, the way the room adjusted when they walked in at full volume. They got the message, they got it clearly. And they started editing themselves in real time before anyone else had to ask. They learned to issue preemptive apologies for their own personality, to wear their intensity like a thing they're embarrassed to be caught with. And now they're an adult with a voice that trails off mid-sentence, with opinions that arrive already half dismantled, waiting for permission that no one in the room has any idea they're waiting for. The fourth type is where it stops being quiet. This one has some fire in it, and that's what makes it so tragic. The righteous folder knows they're right, they are certain of it. They've been wronged clearly, demonstrably in front of witnesses. They have the receipts, they know the argument. They've rehearsed it, and then the other person's face shifts even slightly, just a flicker of hurt or frustration or withdrawal, and something in the righteous folder just collapses. No, you know what, I'm sorry, I think I overreacted. They didn't overreact, but now they're apologizing for being right, for having the audacity to be right in front of someone who didn't want to hear it. The brutal truth about this type, the one nobody tells them, is that they're not afraid of conflict. They're afraid of what conflict has historically led to, not an argument, not even losing, something more devastating. The other person going away, the relationship is going cold, being left. For people with a specific attachment wound, interpersonal conflict doesn't feel like disagreement. It feels like the opening scene of abandonment. The familiar first act of something they've survived before: argument, then tension, then silence, then the slow withdrawal of warmth until there's nothing left to warm yourself with. And the apology, the instant, total, unconditional surrender of their own position, is the fastest exit from that terror. Not because they believe they were wrong, but because being right is simply not worth the sound of someone withdrawing. The cost compounds silently because they always know they surrendered, and the resentment doesn't shout, it just pools, quietly, under everything, until one day there's so much of it underneath a relationship that no apology on earth could drain it. And the fifth type, the one I want to end on because it's the one that'll stay with you. This person doesn't apologize in words, or rather they do, but the apology has gone deeper than language. It lives in how they move. How they laugh and then check the room to see if it was okay to laugh. How they tell a story and punctuate it with their own self-deprecation before you can respond. How they deflect every compliment, every single one, because to accept it would mean admitting they deserve it, and that's a thing their body simply will not allow. They apologize for being good at things. They apologize for being liked. They apologize for joy, for the moments when life is actually working, because somewhere deep in their architecture, joy without penalty doesn't feel like a thing that was ever meant for them. I call this one the apologist for themselves. And it is the heaviest one, because what they're carrying isn't a behavior pattern that developed around a specific relationship or a specific environment. It's a conclusion they reached about themselves wordlessly, gradually, over many years that went something like this. The version of me that is too much, too happy, too loud, too present, that version caused problems. And the version that makes herself smaller, that apologizes first, that never quite allows herself to land fully in any room, that version is safer. That version doesn't get hurt, so they chose the smaller version. And they've lived inside it for so long that they've forgotten, or maybe they never knew, what it felt like to be in a room without an apology already prepared. The thing that undoes me about this type, the thing that is actually brutal if you sit with it, is that the people around them usually have no idea. They see someone warm, self-effacing, funny, and humble. They don't see the machinery underneath. They don't see that every moment of smallness costs something. That every "oh, I'm sure it was nothing," or "sorry, I'm being dramatic," or deflected compliment is another small brick in a wall the person has been building around themselves for decades. A wall made entirely of apologies. A wall, brick by careful brick, between themselves and the life they might have lived at full size. I'm not going to give you a tidy resolution, because there isn't one, not a real one. What I'll say is this: if you found yourself somewhere in this video, not in a vague, "I do that sometimes" way, but in a "this is the specific shape of my specific pain" way, then you already know the thing this video is really about. You don't have a politeness problem. You don't need to work on assertiveness. You need to find the specific moment, the specific room, the specific relationship, the specific experience where you learned that the unedited version of you was dangerous. Where you learned that taking up space had a cost you weren't willing to pay. That moment is usually not dramatic. That's the thing. It's usually so ordinary that you'd be embarrassed to name it as the origin of anything. A face, a silence, a particular way a person looked at you or stopped looking at you when you were exactly yourself. Go find that moment, not to assign blame, not to weaponize it, but because you can't stop apologizing for something you've never named. You can't unshrink yourself while you're still living inside the logic that made you small. Which of these was yours? Not the one that sounds most like a compliment, the one that felt like I was reading something you've never told anyone. That one, right there. You don't have to be sorry for recognizing it.